Hi, everybody. So this is our second lecture for week 6. It's an example of how to use a theoretical tool or a framework in order to write a method section, or you could say how one uses a method section to describe a theoretical tool that you use for a qualitative analysis. So on our Moodle page, I have a couple of examples here, a couple of documents that I'm going to show you how this works. Now, the two documents I'm going to talk about here are the Dexus Tool description and a qualitative methods section example. Now, I want to be really quick to point out these are not using a risk analysis. These are using something called discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is when you have people talking to each other and analyzing what their language means in terms of that conversation. So, for example, in Wyoming, this is just one that always comes up. In Wyoming, we always talk about the borrow pit or the borrow ditch. And for those of you that have lived elsewhere, you'll know that that is not that common. Borrow ditch or borrow pit is actually a construction term. So if you were to talk about a borrow pit in a construction context, it would mean where you're getting your dirt from or your gravel from to build up your road. In Wyoming, it means off the side of the road. So that's a context issue that would be addressed by a Dexus tool. But having said that, let's take a look for just a minute at what the description of what a Dexus tool is. Dexus is how it's really pronounced. Although I always say Dexus because, well, you know, I'm from Montana and that's my context. So there we go. So anyway, the Dexus tool, as it says here, is one of the most important linguistic phenomena in consideration of language. In terms of discourse analysis, which is what my method section is going to describe, it's a vital link between real life environment. In other words, this physical location, the people involved, the time frame, and what we actually say. So Dexus is, in general, is the use of words and phrases to give context to things, such as tomorrow they wear, or as I use, borrow pit. Put another way, it's the anchoring of language in the real world. So I had done a short paper, and this is not a graduate level paper. This is an undergraduate level paper, but I did one using the idea of discourse analysis in terms of some message boards that some of our teachers were using in order to describe some different events in their teaching careers. So it occurred to me when I wanted to do this discourse analysis, it occurred to me that this group of teachers had this incredible shared vocabulary that they had not only, so when they use words, they use them in very specific ways. Another way that you might think about this, although it trivializes the importance, but if you think about it in terms of jargon, you know, every industry, every group of people has its own jargon or its own expressions, its own vernacular. So that's sort of what we were getting at and what I really wanted to investigate. So basically, if you take a look at my method section, first of all, we have the word method, and it tells, I say here what I wanted to do. And then I said discourse analysis. I described what discourse analysis is. And I talked about these general references, which is the same sort of thing that you would do about how discourse analysis is going to apply to what I'm talking about. And then I further specified, because discourse analysis is huge and I could look at 10,000 different things, but I chose to use the Dexus tool, which I misspelled here, that's awesome, to be the most appropriate for this analysis. And I examined what was said and how it tied to that context. So in other words, I'm just describing the method based on these sources. So similarly to the quantitative analysis and the quantitative risk analysis, we're looking at something in the real world. We're looking at risked petroleum reserves. It's a little fancier, it's a little squiffier when we're talking about qualitative research, but it's no less as valid. We don't have a physical reality that we're relating it to. We're relating it back to the body of literature that we studied to create these ideas that we came up with. So basically, as I say here, in this qualitative analysis, I view the discourse through this interpretive lens of pragmatism, which means actions, situations, and consequences of inquiry. So once again, I'm just using that as a context. So I'm building up my case here for why I chose to use the Dexus tool in order to put everything that these teachers said about this program called KidBlog in context. Then this is something that would not be important to our study, but because I was using human subjects, I had to do institutional review board analysis to make sure I wasn't harming anybody. And then I had to get their consent. So, and then I just go through and just talk about the process of how I did it. Once again, I don't really talk about what I actually did. I just talk about my approach. So I didn't really talk about the specifics. If you'll read through that document, you see that there's nothing specific to the document. It's just about the general process. I wrote this document, or I have this document, which is a bulletin board or a discussion board. I wanted to analyze it in context, so I used the Dexus tool. Dexus tool, this is what it looks like, and this is how I'm going to use it. And then I continued from that point. So that's what I want your methods section to look like. The other thing I want you to see here when we take a look at this paper is that this is only 2 pages long. It could be a little bit longer, but 2 pages is a good amount. Now I did this in an 11-point font, but a standard would be a 12-point font. So you do 11 or 12-point font. Section name methods is highlighted, indent 5 spaces, no points before or after those double-spaced lines. All right, everybody. So please let me know if you have questions. And this concludes our second lecture for the methods section. So now I have one example for qualitative, one example for quantitative, and I look forward to hearing your observations. Thanks.